Hello everyone, how's things? Okay, so got something a bit different tonight. I want to talk about something called Imposter Syndrome, but particularly how it relates to musicians. Now you might have heard this phrase before, Imposter Syndrome, and people will bandy it around, but I don't think you've actually been given the kind of definition of what it sort of really means. I mean, you may have heard it sort of like, oh, I feel a bit phony, I feel a bit fake, I think I'm going to get found out, I don't really deserve this. You start doubting your abilities, as a musician, and you end up in this loop where you constantly seem to be on a negative. Oh, I'll never get this right, I'll never get this right. And it just ends up being like a whole load of paranoia, which just brings you down. So, so I want to explain it. I've been reading a few articles, but they were talking about like 5 different types of imposter syndrome. But I think if you put them in order, you kind of get almost like a narrative, like a way of actually coping and understanding with imposter syndrome, and actually what it ends up revealing is that at the end of the day you're just competing with yourself. It's that what Ben Elton used to call Captain Paranoia. Oh yeah, that girl over there, she don't like you, and she thinks you're ugly and boring. The inner critic, I suppose you might want to call it, something along those lines. But it's basically it's a false self, a false sense of self, which is kind of built up. That voice in your head, which is like just being a real downer for you. So anyway, so I was talking about these 5 different. I'm going to call them different states, because you'll see why as we go along. Now, the first one is this illusion of perfectionism. When you're playing, oh, it has to be right. Oh yeah, this note, and I don't know, especially guitarists, and especially this is why I brought this 7-string out, because you'll see like a lot of people on YouTube or Instagram, doing the really technically fluent, and you're kind of thinking, oh, I wish I could play like that, and you're kind of maybe thinking, oh, I'll never reach that point, and and whatever. But it's this thing about perfectionism. Now, by definition, if something is perfect, it can't get any better. So I really want to instill this idea of that. If you realise that you're of a growth mentality, that you're just striving to improve yourself, you're practicing regularly, you're windowing in on perhaps where you're going wrong, then you're going to get better. It's never going to be absolutely perfect. It's going to be close to textbook most of the time, the more you are playing. But there's still a long way to go, and for everybody, whatever level in their I'm going to say musical journey, but that sounds a bit pretentious. But whatever, wherever they are in their however long they've been playing, or whatever level, you'll find that everybody can sort of improve on what they've done. And I remember, and I think it was an interview with actually Richard Burton, the actor Richard Burton, and he was saying how he never reads reviews. Even that I think he was playing Hamlet, and a lot of like the Sunday newspapers were raving about this version of Hamlet he did, and he said he never read it because, first of all, if they said he was crap, then he wouldn't know if he was really crap, or he might never want to play Hamlet ever again. Whereas if they said, oh, it was brilliant and it was a masterpiece, then he's then going to try and improve on what he's done. Whereas secretly he knows when he's actually done that performance, there would have been certain elements of it which he could improve upon. you know. So it's like that. But it's also things like say you're playing, and like you fluff a couple of notes or whatever. Those couple of notes may make you say, oh, that was terrible. Oh, that was a really bad performance. Whereas it was just a couple of notes that might have been off. And most people probably wouldn't have noticed. Most people in the audience, they would have focused on the rest of it, which was really good. But perhaps wouldn't sort of hold those 30-second notes were a bit off. They wouldn't actually hold that against you. So anyway, that's the thing about perfectionism. And I also think that that's kind of like, you ever see that film Whiplash? About the drummer, and he wants to be better, and he's got like the teacher's a bit of a bully. But that's kind of like this idea of like the false self. In a way, the false self is driving you to be better. But ultimately, you're going to overcome that false self and find your own identity, who you are. Okay, so that's the thing about perfectionism. The next one is to do expertise. Like you're going to find that, especially if you're, sometimes you might find yourself you're learning one style or whatever. You're in one area of music, and then you move over to something else, or you start listening to classical music, or you start something like, in England there used to be the Open University. They do programs, like there'd be lectures about classical music, or you might find something like this online. And first of all, fascinating stuff, but it may just go whoosh really over your head, and you're realising, well, there's just so much there to learn. So you're kind of almost overwhelmed with stuff to learn about, expertise. But if you're regularly, again, they've got this idea of like sort of gradually refining and improving yourself. If you're prepared to just like put in just a few hours a day, just maybe just reading some articles or watching some videos about, say, music theory, or how to master techniques, or comparing different styles, comparing say like classical guitar with electric guitar, or I think you know what I'm going. Then you're going to be in a much better position than if you're just sort of like just staying on that one thing, and then being overwhelmed because somebody's got more theory knowledge than you have, or somebody's got a stronger technique than you have. That just comes down to expertise. So it's important just to keep coming back, and just gradually building up your knowledge. Just improving on your expertise, and then you'll find that those like the false thinking, what you thought was expertise actually isn't. You'll find that will start to yield, and you'll see that, well, no, because I've got all this knowledge laid out. I know that way of thinking doesn't really work that well. I'm going to pursue this. You'll find that. So that's something really, this whole idea of like continuing to refine and improve. So that's going to really get you through that stage. Okay, so once you've passed the expertise stage, we'll then talk about what's known as the genius phase, which is where, well, alright, so I know this bit's true, and I know this bit's true. What if I try this? What if I try that? This is known as like being the genius, where you'll get somebody who will just flip the whole thing on its head. Say like, I know that Van Halen wasn't like, Eddie Van Halen he wasn't the first person to discover tapping, say, but the way he used it, nobody had really sort of like used it to that level. And then after Eddie, of course, you're getting people like Stanley Jordan, who's using tapping, but using like four-handed tapping, and he's playing jazz standards, and he's playing the guitar like a keyboard. I'm sure you can think of some others, but But it's that fear of perhaps striking out on your own, of doing your own thing, and it's kind of like, oh, what's everybody else going to think? Well, nobody else plays like this. Well, why should I do it? And always perhaps feeling maybe a bit sort of intimidated to actually want to try new ideas, to actually sort of bring the instrument, forward. Stop it being stuck in the past, sort of thing. Is that making some sense? I certainly hope so. I mean, you'll find this like with a lot of like the real geniuses, of all disciplines. Like whether it be Einstein or Isaac Newton or Bach, of course. I mean, I remember that hearing this story about Johann Sebastian Bach. Precocious talent that he used to play like the church organ for everybody, and the usual sort of like standing up just like to sing the hymns, and it'd be all very very solemn, blah 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 blah, and he'd be sort of like jamming and putting all like sort of little twiddly bits in it, and then he'd be told, no, stop doing that, but of course all those little sort of things he was trying out like that then sort of prepared him for in later life, where he was writing stuff where even now perhaps nobody could really touch him as a composer, because he was at that level where he was just prepared just to keep sort of experimenting and trying out new stuff. Okay, so that was that's the genius. So they covered the perfectionist, the expert or expertise, the genius. Next, the soloist. This is where it actually does come very relevant to being a musician, because you're now striking out on your own. It's kind of like it's the equivalent of say like you've been in a band but you're feeling a bit stifled by being in that band, so you want to be on your own. You want to start your own solo project. And like how many of these forum adverts have you seen where it's it's kind of like guitarist seeking drummer and bass player and just to play that sort of basically like his sort of self-indulgent guitar music, whereas like as somebody who has gone through those three phases and reached that level of what I call genius, it wouldn't be self-indulgent music anymore, because he'd have the knowledge to back it up, he'd have the technique to back it up. He'd also know how, sorry, I'm saying he, I mean I can mean she as well. He or she, they would know how to actually work, with other musicians, and how to bring the best out of other musicians, simply by virtue of having been there themselves. That common experience. And that's so even though you're solo, effectively the group becomes like a full band. It may have your name on it, but I mean, I always think of like people like some of the great band leaders. They would just fill the group with just really good players. Like Miles Davis. He would just fill the band with just really great players. But it wouldn't necessarily be about, hey, look at me, aren't I cool? It would be less about that and more about, right, I've got this really great keyboard player here. I've got this really brilliant sax player. I've got this really brilliant drummer. This bass player is probably the best guy in the world at what he does, So it's things like that. So even though it's kind of like, it's almost like paradoxical. Even though you're solo, you are kind of like starting to inspire other people. So that's level 4. And then level 5, of course, obviously, like when you've reached that point, where like you're no longer a prisoner of perfectionism. You've got the knowledge and the expertise to back it up. You've got the risk taking and the imagination to call yourself a genius, and to actually prove that you're a genius through the examples that you've been working on. And now you've been a soloist, where you're actually also a good band leader, that knows how to give and take sort of direction from the people you're working with, So we then come to the fifth one, which is known as the superhero, or this, like the Superwoman, Superman. And in this one, I mean, you can kind of like, I mean, I haven't seen that many of the like those Avengers movies or Spider. Well, I've always been a big Spider-Man fan anyway. This is the hero's called Peter, but you know how like in these superhero films, like especially like things like Superman and Spider-Man, they're up against this real sort of antagonist. There's like sort of world threatening or even universe threatening, but somehow that threat is sort of tied in with the like this person's it's almost like I say, it's almost like it's like a doppelganger identity. And that's when you get to that point where you're wrestling with this false self. You're finding that false self really no longer has a place, because that doppelganger has to have mastered all those things which you've been through, and of course you've proven yourself. You see, you've proven that you know how to not necessarily say conquer those problems, because they're going to be with you, but how to harness those threats into positive strengths and positive energies. And like through working with those things which at the moment or which are acting against you, but actually working with them. Music, I mean, of course, it's all about finding harmony, resolution, resolution and dissonance, what works, what clashes, and it is about bringing people together, and it's probably the greatest form of uniting people, in terms of like the art forms. I mean, theatre maybe, but then again, music and theatre are very closely related, as is literature as well. So it's like I said, it's a slightly different video, this one. There's no playing in it, but I just wanted to throw it out there in case you've been feeling that sort of, oh, I don't really belong here, I don't really deserve it. Maybe that's just the start of your step into into this other realm, which could be really exciting for you. Could bring up some really good results for you. And I think actually just before I close, I mean, on that, like, having reached that sort of like superhero level, I mean, when you get back to like some of these big rock stars, say like Van Halen, where people are calling you the greatest guitarist in the world, well, you've got to kind of live up to that, like the drink and the drugs and whatnot. I mean, that aside, you've still got to deliver. You've got to maintain it. So then in a way it's kind of cyclic, because you then go back to the start, because you're having to this whole thing about like improving yourself. This thing about that you've never really fully achieved perfection. All you've got is you're just at another level. And you're gonna have to work through the whole thing, yet again. But I suppose, I mean, like maybe like with with some of these martial arts guys, they get the different belts and the different downgrades, and and then you realise that at the higher grades there's only like sort of 2 or 3 people who've got those grades in the world, and then of course you got the issue of like trying to find a decent teacher for yourself, and all sorts of interesting stuff like that. But yeah, but I just wanted to throw that out there to you. Yeah, just by way of just doing something a bit different tonight. So welcome to the channel if you're new. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.